How to stop the moaners and grumblers.
Hello, and welcome to the Mark and Pete Show. Well, there's a lot of things in society that just get on people's goat. They keep grumbling and mumbling, whether it's about the economy or politicians. It could be something that's really an issue with the lockdown, and they've been living with somebody who's constantly moaning and groaning. Well, it's understandable, but my word, is getting quite depressing. So how do you actually stop them from moaning and groaning? Oh, if only there were some techniques. Well, congratulations, you've come to the right place because Mark and Pete have the answers. And so it really is, when we think about society, we know that COVID-19 has made the world a very depressing place, but there are opportunities. And so how do you stop things from simply falling on deaf ears? If you are someone who has constantly moaned, grumbled and griped and exhaustively groaned, where your dull dialogue has definitely droned, it's no wonder that you are sometimes disowned. Bertram Pete, how do you stop a moaning ninny?
Well, here's a question for the ages, Mr. Mark. How do we stop people moaning and grumbling and groaning and complaining? Now, I wanted to start by reminding people that the Bible does teach against this, which we will be aware of, but it's not often realised or noted how important this is seen in the Bible. If you're a moaner, if you're a grumbler, if you're always talking negatively without offering any solutions, it's actually seen as a very important sin. I suppose you look at it, very important to be dealt with. It all went back to when God rescued the people of God out of Egypt, and the people grumbled, saying the food wasn't quite as good as it was when they were slaves. And he said, the people grumbled, saying, "What are we to drink? What are we to eat?" He says, Numbers 14:29, "In this wilderness your bodies will fall, every one of you 20 years old or more, who was counted in the census and who has grumbled against me." So they weren't going to get into the promised land. And just going forward to the New Testament, we find the letter from the Apostle James, chapter 5, verse 9, "Don't grumble against one another, brothers and sisters, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door." So this is seen as very, very important. We need to show people that actually grumbling, being constantly negative, is something that can ruin almost anything. It just ruins things. You could bring down a great corporation. So it's very, very important. What's to be done about it? Well, I guess we can look at that through the rest of this episode. But it begins with recognizing that problem, that it's something very, very serious. It seems like something minor, but I think that's really because so many people do it.
Yes, indeed. Well, they seem to do it in all walks of life. And from a business perspective, it is not surprising that many business owners and many employees have grumbled their way through the last year. And with good reason. The economy is poor, the nations are in debt, we've had to deal with COVID-19, we've had to deal with some very, very strange politicians, some that have come into the fold and others that have finally left. But either way, we are all looking for some form of salvation as to what that would be. But in actual fact, from a business perspective, I think it's almost impossible to go through your career where you haven't met some curmudgeon who moans and groans about corporate life, whether it be about the policies, whether it be about opportunities in their career. And it's not surprising that when you come to an environment, a market, where it seems on the surface as though there's few opportunities. But ironically, a lot of top salespeople will tell you do listen to the moaners and groaners, particularly those who are out there as customers who just moan and groan about the service or the products, because it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to solve a problem, or potentially sell another product range, or potentially do something to help that customer in a way that can make their lives a lot better, meaning it'll stop them moaning and groaning, and actually you'll have somebody who will trust you. When it comes to problems that many people often face, where they've got some moaner and groaner who complains about whether it be the executives or the executives themselves moaning about their own employees, that's where I think you've got to step back and say, who is actually at fault? Is it maybe that the corporate executive is just not listening to the market or listening to their employees? Maybe they're not communicating correctly. So it's inevitable that they're getting frustrated, or simply the other way around, that maybe that the employee just wants everything laid on a plate and are not prepared to do things. But the moaning and groaning usually comes from something which displaces you in terms of what you see as your goals, meaning if you feel that your career isn't going well, many people will moan and groan. But that's possibly because you're not looking at your career in the right way. It could be that if you're thinking that measure of your career is around salary, salary isn't the only thing. Salary is a consequence of the contribution you give and the value you give to your company, your customers. And the rewards will come if you look on the positive side, which is that you can solve problems. The more problems that you solve, the more ways that you innovate and come up with ideas, the more chance that you've got of stopping everybody from moaning and helping yourself to get better jobs, get better offers. And actually, it will give you the rewards, and that could be financial, but it also could give you elevations in status. So from a business perspective, I think look at moaning and groaning as almost a sort of a day-to-day thing that will inevitably happen, but see it in a positive way in the sense of trying to find the root cause. Because moaning and groaning can get people down. And we've seen this in society where people have had to be displaced. Effectively, they've come from a corporate office, for example, and they've had to work from home. That environment has been very, very challenging. They've not been easily adapted because either the challenges of not having the resources that they once had in an office, or the lack of resources or the distractions they've got at home. But what's good about, and this is where I'm turning the positive side, you can moan and groan about that, but I think that the good thing is, over the last year, certainly in a commercial terms, people have adapted and they've learned to adapt. So actually, the moaning and groaning about working from home is less on the agenda now, because people have started to recognize that they can turn that to good effect. They can certainly serve their customers in a different way. And in fact, in some cases, they can actually extend their hours or adapt their hours. So the point about moaning and groaning is inevitable when people don't get what they want or can't necessarily have the experience or the skills to solve a problem.
Yeah.
And that's where I think in business, it's the moaning and groaning is something to recognize in yourself as well as others, but critically and quickly think about what you can do. And if you need to turn to help, turn to help. Now, there are many people in business who will do that, whether it be HR departments, your line managers, your colleagues. And what I can say from a personal experience, I've been very impressed by organizations who have recognized that challenge and have put a lot of effort into ensuring that people stop moaning and groaning and see the positive side of things. So, Clergyman Pete, there's a lot there that you can take into society and sort of think about how you can draw upon turning things and adapting so that the moaning and groaning stops and you move forward.
Yes, I mean, let's look at this as it affects the rest of society. It's interesting that you're looking from a business point of view, and I earlier put the biblical point of view of it. But it really is endemic in society. We've got a pandemic maybe raging around the world, or that's what people have been saying. Maybe a bigger pandemic is that of groaning and moaning certainly in Britain. I've got information about Britain, and maybe our listeners can tell us if the whole world is made up of a bunch of whingers. But certainly in Britain we have that issue. I've got some research. This is from before the pandemic hit, so it doesn't include things like working from home too much and that sort of thing. But this is from the end of 2019. I've got the top UK moans. What do you think the number one is? I just
moaning? What about politicians? Is it maybe?
Yes, that's joint number one. The weather and politics is weather. Not getting enough sleep is number three.
Oh, right.
And work, which is what you're talking about, because that's talking about business, that sort of work, is 28%. Weather and politics was 34%. Just to give you an idea. Bad customer service is 27%. Now, just look at these, taking them in turn. Politics you can do something about. You can vote, you can get involved. Weather, well, you can't do anything about the weather, but you can buy an umbrella. Not getting enough sleep, well, there's something you can do about that. Go to bed earlier. Work, you can, you've talked about ways you can approach that. Maybe it's the business that needs to change its practices to allow people to have a voice or to feel that they have more buy-in into the company. But
yes.
At number 5, bad customer service at 27%. Well, you could try actually speaking to the manager instead of just grumbling about it behind the scenes and then giving them a bad review. So there were ways to cope with these things, but just as a bit of fun. What do you think is the most moany city in the UK?
The curmudgeon city.
Yes, I've got
one
it
of
here.
The United Kingdom.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Well, did you know?
If you can get one in the top 5, I'll give it to you, because there's quite a few cities in Britain.
Are there? Liverpool.
Liverpool's not. No, you would have thought Liverpool. That's number 8. Number 8. I did say top 5.
Quite high.
Oh, it's up there. It's up there with them. Yes, yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you because I don't think you're going to get. Well, number 1 is Plymouth.
Is it really? Goodness me, the South Coast.
Give me one other one in the top 5. Go on.
Okay,
a big city, because I didn't think you'd get Plymouth.
So I'm assuming it's not on the South Coast. So I'm going the Midlands, Birmingham.
Birmingham's number 10. No, it goes like this. First 5 are Plymouth, Nottingham, Cardiff, London, and Glasgow. So some of those you may or may not expect. But it's interesting that whinging and moaning is very widespread, and yet it's really bad for you. It's bad for your health.
Yeah.
Now, research has shown that actually, research has shown without actually telling you the research, but what I'm talking about is particularly a survey conducted in the UK again in 2019, which was done at the same time. It was part of the survey I mentioned earlier, which looked at how many people moaned. It actually also looked at that same survey that I was referring to, looked at the things that people moan about and the effect that it has on them. It causes a real problem with the production of the stress hormone cortisol. Chronic complaining causes you to be overstressed. So then it becomes the same sort of issues as to do with stress or depression. You get the immune system weakened. You'd be more likely to be susceptible to COVID-19. You get a rise in blood pressure. You're at risk of obesity, heart disease, etc. So don't grumble. It's bad for you. It could kill you, says this survey that I've just referred to in 2019. But it's interesting to note that what does help, so we're moving on to what can help now, is occasional venting. So don't grumble or murmur or mumble all the time, but if occasionally you have a good old rant, maybe by having a podcast or radio show to talk on once a week, that can really help you. So having the occasional vent, which
this
you
is
plan,
actually, folks, we can reveal a therapy session for clergymen.
that you can, if you choose the right people to rant to, a good friend of yours or something like that, then it can work. So this is something that can really help. It relieves the stress by you having someone to talk to, or if there's a problem, you actually speak to the person who can do something about it. Not mumbling, but actually speak to them reasonably. I'm talking about things like if the food isn't cooked properly, you talk to the chef, this sort of thing. But constant murmuring and mumbling, it has the same effect on you as being overstressed by losing your job or by having a marriage breakup or that sort of thing. So it is very serious. So do something about it. And one of the ways I said is simply to have a rant at a suitable time.
Well, indeed, and in fact, a beautifully observed comedy series, certainly
Yes.
one in the United Kingdom, was called One Foot in the Grave, and
Yeah.
it mainly focused around probably the biggest curmudgeon of all time, was a character called Victor Meldrew. The basis was that such, as the series started, that he was ousted from his position, he really had no other opportunities, and he went into retirement. But the point being is that he was pretty much moaning and groaning about everything. That was the basis. And he always ended up being effectively the fall guy to his moaning and groaning, and never really being able to see a way out of this. And whilst there is humour in that, it became obvious that all of those people around him would get caught up or sucked up into the moaning and the whinging. And as an observer to that series, you could see that when you then cast your eye wider across the landscape, how many curmudgeons there are. And you mentioned about in Britain, it is a bit of a national pastime, a little bit like tea drinking and talking about the weather. And I wonder whether that's something that, again, that we should as a nation start to maybe correct, because actually what's wrong with being happy? I mean, the fact is that you're right. People will always have something to complain about in their lives. It's inevitable. That's just the nature of life. But it seems as though some people are just happy being miserable. There's a good oxymoron for you. I mean, it's incredible where it's that path seems the easier route, doesn't it? So if you think psychologically, it's much easier to complain about something than actually to solve a problem and actually come up with an idea that can get you into a more positive path. So I think that when we think about where Britain is today, thinking ahead, Clergyman Pete, as the doors of the church begin to open, hopefully in the near future, what are your thoughts in terms of get it as a call out to our curmudgeons? That
Well, coming out of lockdown, when more church activities will be on. I just mentioned, of course, that the church, well, my churches that I vicar of in the northwest of England have been open. They're open. There is worship there every week. But of course, as more people come back, feeling confident to venture out, blinking into the sunlight after being locked up, the message they would have is to follow two things that have been said in the past. One is that a rather amusing song that we were talking about in the pre-meeting before this show, which was made famous by such luminaries as Bing Crosby, Perry Como, and even went as far as Johnny Mercer and Aretha Franklin. That's accentuate the positive. As although it's an amusing song, it was based on some words of a preacher that the lyricist heard and put into this song. And it begins, you've got to accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, and don't mess with Mr. In-Between. Now, although it's just a jokey song, it does encapsulate the importance of looking at what's positive rather than always going on about what's negative. I don't think actually you want to eliminate the negative necessarily, but you want to accentuate the positive, that is, go for the positive wherever possible. If there's too much negativity, you get too stressed and you're going to get sick. That's what I was saying earlier. So let's just switch it around. And the way that one way to do that is to follow, this was the other thing I was going to say, some words of Norman Vincent Peale, famous radio show host, so equivalent of a podcast host like us today, and preacher back in the 1950s. He wrote an influential book called The Power of Positive Thinking, in which he said that you could use Bible verses, which when repeated, taking them in context, so using them to mean what they really meant in the Bible, but applying them to you. And I've actually used this, given this as a sort of like a tablet to take once a day before breakfast to cure you of your mumbling and groaning. And it is this one particular phrase from the Bible: I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And then you repeat it a few times. Let's say repeat it 6 times, or say it 6 times altogether. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And if you take that verse, which is from Philippians 4 verse 13, that's Philippians 4 verse 13, in whatever version you choose, it doesn't have to be the exact words that I said, they're all something like that. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You remind yourself that things aren't as bad as they seem, and instead of mumbling and grumbling, you realise actually there's a lot of positive things you can achieve. That's a start. It's only a start, but it's a way of changing your mindset. And if you keep doing that, then, maybe you, gentle listener, or... Well, actually, none of our listeners are mumblers and grumblers. They're all wonderful people. I'm not talking to you, gentle listener. I'm talking to that bloke or that woman who's mumbling or grumbling all the time. They should try this, and they'll be changed. It's a chance for them to change if they take this medicine every day.
Well, there you go. Positive words. That's what we want. So, listeners, what do you think? Are you living with a curmudgeon, somebody who constantly moans and groans? Or maybe actually you've got a manager that you think is just depressing and the dialogue is dull and definitely droning. We'd love to hear from you. Well, we would certainly read out your case study on the next show, and we have the answers. Well, hopefully this has given you some tips as to how to sort of move away from the life that is depressing and where people are constantly moaning. Join us again next time for more positive, topical topics with Clergyman Pete and Businessman Mark.